I'm fishing in a ponder with no content on my line when all of a sudden I feel a tug and a and jumping out of the water, no word of a line. Maybe it was the mushrooms, but splashing back beside me was God, and he looked like Nietzsche, and before I could ask, he was like, hey, wanna play Nietzsche Says? And I was like, are you dead? And he was like, only if I say so. And I was like, wow, I think I got a bite. And he was like, Nietzsche says drop the fishing pole, bitch. And I was like, and he was like, Nietzsche says touch your nose. And I was like, and he was like, Nietzsche says touch your head. And I was like, and he was like, do cocaine, kill your father, fuck your mother. And I was like, sweet! And he was like, Nietzsche didn't say so. And I was like, fucking Freud. And he was like, okay, you wanna go again? I was like, okay, sure. He's like, first, Nietzsche says pass the mushrooms. And I was like, they're all gone. And he was like, Nietzsche says reach in your pocket. And I was like, whoa. And he was like, water into wine, stupid. And I was like, wow. And he was like, Nietzsche says, go down on all fours. And I was like, and he was like, ooh, Nietzsche says bark like a dog. And I was like, roof. And he was like, Nietzsche says bark again. And I was like, roof. And he was like, Nietzsche says bark again. And I was like, roof. And he was like, Nietzsche says, ooh, whip me, I'm bad. And I was like, I'm out. And he was like, and I was like, awkward. Mushrooms? And he was like, no, I just had Donair. And I was like, huh? And he was like, yeah, I don't know. And I was like, okay, let's go again. He was like, all right, one more. Nietzsche says, make a mustache with your finger. And I was like, and he was like, Nietzsche says, raise your right hand in the air. And I was like, and he was like, march through Poland, make God spell your own, claiming absolute power, make Mother Nature's Mr. Clean, hail Hitler! And I was like, dude, Nietzsche didn't say so. And he was like, exactly! Nietzsche says my sister's a gold-digging whore! And I was like, yeah, she is. And he was like, how'd you get so good at Nietzsche Says? You don't read? And I was like, Wikipedia. And he was like, no shit. And I was like, yeah. And my girlfriend's a doctor of philosophy. And he was like, that's hot. And I was like, Paris. And he was like, France. And I was like, are you dead? And he was like, no, but Nietzsche is. Oh, Scheiße! Poof! Just like that, he was gone. Even though I only have this one that got away story to prove it, that was the day I lost my God fishing in a ponder with no content on my line to a fish bigger than even I could carry.
Wonderful!